If we take financial statements, what do we have there? What do we have there? Assume this is our set of financial statements. These are our financial statements. What do we consider as financial statements? So what are the components of financial statements? There are 5 main components of financial statements. What are those? P&L is there. What else? Balance sheet is there. Cash flow statement is there. Statement of changes in equity is there. Apart from that, some other additional notes are there. All together, these components all together we identify as what? Financial statements. Financial statements. So why we need to analyze these financial statements? That is what we are going to do right now. No? So why do we need to analyze them? Financial statements analyze karanna. Why? Why do we need to analyze these financial statements? For what? What is the purpose of analyzing these P&Ls, balance sheets, cash flow statement? What is the purpose? Why do we perform analysis based on these financial statements? For what? For what? To make effective decisions. Right? To make effective decisions. To make effective decisions. To make effective decisions. Who make these decisions? To whom? To whom? Why we analyze financial statements? Why we analyze financial statements? Why financial statements are being analyzed? To make effective decisions. To whom? Kauda me tirana ganni? Kauda? Api eyalta kiyanama kawuru kiyalada? Users. In common we say them as users. Users. These users, in broad sense, we can classify it into 2 groups. These users we can classify it into 2 groups as internal users as well as external users. There are internal users as well as there are external users. Who are internal users? Those who are within the organization, within the company, like company employees, management, those who are within the organization, internal users. Then who are external users? Those who are out, those who are not within the entity, not within the company. Examples: suppliers, customers, general public, even government, those are coming under external users. So the purpose for these external users, if you take a potential investor or an existing investor, the purpose that he or she is analyzing these financial statement may be differ from someone else, right? Government එක මේක analyze කරන්නේ වෙන purpose එකක් ඔළුවේ තියාගෙන. Investor කෙනෙක් මේ financial statement analyze කරන්නේ වෙන purpose එකක් ඔළුවේ තියාගෙන. Right? Employee unions financial statement analyze කරන්නේ වෙන purpose එකක් ඔළුවේ තියාගෙන, right? Whatever the purpose, ultimately they use these analyzers to make what? To make decisions. Based on the analyzers they perform based on these financial statements, they do what? They make decisions. Right. So here, what we supposed to discuss is on this analyzing. Right. Financial statements analysis. So there we come across several techniques. Mainly there are 3 techniques. There are 3 main techniques. You know what are the main 3 techniques we use when analyzing financial statements. Financial statements analyze කරද්දී අපි පාවිච්චි කරන ප්‍රධානම techniques 3ක් මොනවද? එකක් horizontal analysis, right? Horizontal analysis. Second one, vertical analysis. Vertical analysis. Trend analysis is also there. And the third one, ratio analysis, right? Ratio analysis. So under this topic, we are supposed to discuss on this ratio analysis. Ratio analysis. There are various techniques we can use in order to analyze financial statements. Why we analyze financial statements, or why users analyze financial statements to make effective decisions. So some of these techniques are horizontal analysis, vertical analysis, and ratio analysis. So under this topic, we especially focus on this ratio analysis. Right. These ratios we can classify it into 5 main groups. We can classify it into 5 main groups. What are those? One is profitability ratios. Profitability ratios. There are some profitability ratios. By computing such ratios, we can take an understanding, have an understanding about the profitability of the company, whether it is improving or whether it is eroding. Likewise, profitability ratios are there. What else? Profitability ratios are there. Solvency ratios are there. Solvency ratios. Solvency ratios. Solvency ratios are there. Right? The ability of the company to pay off its debts. ණය ගත්තනම් ඒ ණය ගෙවන්න කොච්චර හැකියාවක් තියෙනවද කියලා අපිට idea එකක් ගන්න ඕන නම්, so we can refer to solvency ratios, right? How capable the company is in paying off its debts, right? So that insights is being provided. That insight we can obtain by computing these solvency ratios. And what else? We have liquidity ratios. This one, liquidity ratios, right? Liquidity ratios. Examples. There are 2 most popular examples. What? Current ratio and fixed asset ratio. Those are coming under liquidity ratios. So it means what? How quickly we can pay off debts. See the difference? In solvency ratios, it discusses about what? The ability of a company to pay off its debts. ණය ගෙවන්න තියෙන හැකියාව. Solvency ratios වලින් කියන්නේ. Liquidity ratios වලින් කියන්නේ මොකක්ද? The ability to pay it quickly, as much as possible, right? ණය ගෙවන්න තියෙන හැකියාව ගැන කියන්නේ solvency ratios වලින්. අපිට ඒ ණය කොච්චර ඉක්මනට ගෙවන්න පුළුවන්ද? How quickly we can pay off that debts. That idea is given through liquidity ratios. Solvency ratios and liquidity ratios. For an example, right? A general example එකක් ගමු. කාගෙන් හරි ණයක් කරන් තියෙනවා. කාගෙන් හරි ණයක් කරන් තියෙනවා. ඒ ණය ගෙවන්න වත්කම ඔයාගාව තියෙනවා. හිතන්න ඔයාගාව ඉඩම් තියෙනවා. Right? වත්කම් තියෙනවා. You have so much of land, so you can pay off that debt. Your solvency is good. ගෙවන්න තියෙන හැකියාව හොඳයි. ඔයාගාව වත්කම් තියෙනවා. You have enough debt, enough assets to pay off the loan that you have obtained. But those assets, majority of your assets are what? Are in kinds of lands. ඉඩම් විදියට තමයි ඔයාගේ වත්කම් තියෙන්නේ. ණය ගෙවන්න හැකියාව තිබ්බට solvency එක හොඳ වුණාට මොකක් නැද්ද? Liquidity එක ඉක්මනට ගෙවන්න බෑ. ගෙවන්න පුළුවන් වත්කම් තියෙනවා. හැබැයි ඒක ඉක්මනට ගෙවන්න බෑ. Difference between solvency and liquidity. Right? The ability to pay debts, the ability to pay off debts is what we mean by solvency. How quickly we can pay off, that is provided in terms of liquidity. The difference. What else? The ratios there. There are efficiency ratios, right? Efficiency ratios. efficiency ratios. Examples, inventory turnover, right? Receivable turnover, payable creditors turnover, inventory period, collection period, payable payment period, those all are coming under efficiency ratios. Efficiency ratios. And the last category is what? Investment. Right? Investment, or we can say market ratios. Market ratios. So these are the 5 main categories of ratios, right? 5 main categories coming under ratios. Let's take a simple term ratio. Anupatyak ratio ka kiyala kiyanne anupatyak ne. Anupatyak kiyala kiyanne mona wage deyak? What is a ratio? What kind of thing is we called a ratio? Right. Ratio means something like this, isn't it? ඔය වගේ එකක් නේද අපි ratio එකක් කියලා කියන්නේ. Like a fraction, right? අනුපාතයක්. P over Q form එකෙන් ලියන්න පුළුවන් නම් මොකද්ද? ඒක අනුපාතයක්. Right? We should clearly able to see what is in the numerator and what is in the denominator. Numerator එකේ තියෙන්නේ මොකක්ද? Denominator එකේ තියෙන්නේ මොකක්ද කියලා අපිට පැහැදිලිව අඳුන ගන්න පුළුවන් නම් ඒක මොකක්ද? Ratio එක. අනුපාතයක්. That is a ratio. Right. So how can you improve this ratio? Whatever the figure coming out of this ratio, I need to improve. I need to increase that. For an example, assume GP margin, which is coming under profitability ratios, GP margin. How can we calculate GP margin? How can we calculate GP margin? Gross profit over sales. Gross profit over sales, if we need to represent it as a percentage, we need to multiply by 100. Gross profit over sales, this is in the numerator, sales is in the denominator. It is in P over Q form ratio. Right. So we need to increase, we need to improve gross profit margin. So we need to improve a ratio. I will take it common. We need to improve a ratio. මෙන්න මේ ratio එකෙන් එන අගය වැඩි කරගන්න ඕන. What are the options we are having? අපිට තියෙන options මොනවද? What are the options we are having? First one, right? I will take some figures here. 25 over 100. This is a ratio. This is a ratio. What is the answer? 0.25. 0.25. I need to increase this one. I need to increase this figure. So what are the options we are having? එකක් මොකක්ද? මෙයා constant තියාගෙන මෙයා වෙනස් කරන්න නැතුව තියාගෙන මෙන්න මේ numerator එක වැඩි කරොත් if I make this as 30, 35, 40 while remain my denominator value as it is, what will happen? The ratio value will improve, isn't it? මෙයාව ඒ විදිහටම තියාගෙන අපේ numerator එකේ අගය වැඩි කරොත් මොකක් වෙනවද? ratio එකේ අගය වැඩි වෙනවා. So that is one option we are having, right? We can improve the numerator, we can increase the numerator while keeping the denominator as it is. මෙයාව වැඩි කරනවා මෙයා ඒ විදිහටම තියාගන්න. That is one option. What else? What else we can do to improve this ratio? යාම තව වැඩි කරගන්න මට තියෙන අනිත් options මොනවද? එකක් හරි. මෙයා ඒ විදිහටම තියාගෙන මෙයාව වැඩි කරන්න. තව what else? ඕකේ අනිත් පැත්ත අපිට කරන්න පුළුවන්. ඒ කියන්නේ numerator එක will keep the numerator constant. Will keep the numerator constant, and if we decrease the denominator, still it will result in what? Improving the ratio. Example here, I will keep the numerator as it is. Numerator එක 25යි ඒක ඒ විදිහටම තියාගන්නවා. Denominator එක අඩු කරොත් මොකද වෙන්නේ? Assume instead of 100 I am considering 50 here. What will happen to the ratio? It will improve, it will increase. See, Earlier it was 0.25, now it is what? 0.5. So that is also another way of improving the ratio. We keep our numerator constant. Constant. We will keep our numerator constant, and if we decrease the denominator, then again we can see an improvement in the ratio. So this is another option we are having. What else? What else we can do in order to improve this ratio? This knowledge you can apply when we are computing each of these individual ratios. This general knowledge you can apply to individual cases, right? Here, if we need to improve the gross profit margin, but keeping sales as it is, we need to increase the gross profit. Gross profit is made up of what? Sales and cost of sales, right? So then what we can do? Do we need to increase the selling price, right? Or do we need to reduce the direct cost of sales involved? Likewise, we can make decisions. So here, what else? In order to improve this ratio, so these are two options we are having. What else? Numerator එක වැඩි කරන ගමන් denominator එක අඩු කරලා තියෙනවා. Right? Numerator එක වැඩි කරන ගමන් denominator එක අඩු කරලා තියෙනවා. For an example, if I increase the numerator by 10, it will become 35. And if I reduce the denominator by any number, let's say I have reduced it by 20. Right? 35 over 80. Right? 35 over 80. Then it is what? That will result in 0.4375. Again, what has happened to our ratio? That has improved, that has gone up. So that is also another way. While increasing the numerator, if you decrease the denominator, then again it will result in an improvement in the ratio. Right? An improvement in the ratio. While increasing the numerator, if you decrease the denominator, again, right, you can see an improvement in the ratio. That is the third option we are having. What else? Cover with it here, ratio improve karagana. Yes, they are. What else? Right? Another way to improve this ratio is that if we increase our numerator at a rate higher than the increase of denominator. Denominator එක වැඩි කරන වේගයට වඩා වැඩි වේගයි. Right? නැත්නම් වැඩි percentage එකකින් අපි numerator එක වැඩි කරනවා නම් හිතන්න මෙයාව අපි වැඩි කරනවා 110කින්. ඊට වඩා වැඩි වේගකින් මෙයාව වැඩි කරනවා. Assume we increase this by 25%, then what will happen? See, 100% increase by 10%, it will become 110. Right? And we increase our numerator a rate higher than this improving rate of the denominator, 25%. So 25, if we increase 25 by 25%, then it will result in what? 31.25. So what is the ratio then? Ratio is 0.28. Again, the ratio has gone up. So that is also another way to improve a ratio. Denominator එක නැත්නම් යට ඉන්න එක්කෙනා වැඩි කරන වේගයට වඩා වැඩි වේගකින් අපිට උඩ ඉන්න එක්කෙනා වැඩි කරන්න පුළුවන් නම් අපිට මොකක් කරගන්න පුළුවන්ද? ratio එකේ value එක වැඩි කරගන්න පුළුවන්. We need to increase the numerator at a rate higher than the increasing rate of the denominator. මෙයා වැඩි කරනවා. හැබැයි ඒ වැඩි කරන වේගයට වඩා වැඩි වේගකින් numerator එක වැඩි කළොත් still we can improve the ratio. What else? තව මොනවද තියෙන්නේ? මේකේ අනිත් පැත්තත් අපිට ගන්න පුළුවන්. We can take the opposite of this. මෙයා අඩු කරන වේගයට වඩා වැඩි වේගකින් මෙයා අඩු කළොත්, assume I am going to reduce the figure in the numerator by 20%. I am going to reduce the figure in the numerator by 20%. මෙයා අඩු කරනවා ඊටත් වඩා වැඩි percentage එකකින්. Assume I am going to reduce this by 50%. මෙයාත් අඩු වෙනවා, මෙයාත් අඩු කරනවා. හැබැයි මොකද්ද? numerator එක අඩු කරන percentage එකට වඩා වැඩි percentage එකකින් තමයි යට ඉන්න එක්කෙනාව අඩු කරන්නේ. Then what will happen? See, 25. If we reduce it by 20%, what will be the answer? That is 20. I will write it here. That is 20. If we decrease 60 by 50%, it will result in 50. So now what is the percentage? That is 0.4. Again, the ratio has gone up. So that is also another option we are having. Right? While if we decrease our denominator in a higher rate compared to the decrease of the numerator එක අඩු වෙන වේගයට වඩා වැඩි වේගකින්, ඒක මම මේ arrow එක දික් කළේ. මෙයා අඩු වෙන වේගයට වඩා වැඩි වේගකින් වැඩි percentage එකකින් මෙයා අඩු වුණත් මොකක් වෙනවද? අපේ ratio එක improve වෙනවා. So these are in general the options we are having in order to improve an ratio. So these are the options we are having in order to improve an ratio, right? Options, let me write it here. Options to improve ratios. එකම වෙනස වෙන්නේ මොකක්ද? Financial statement වල ratio analysis වලට වෙදී එකම වෙනස වෙන්නේ මොකක්ද? මේ P කියන එකයි Q කියන එකයි වෙනුවට මොකක්ද? අපේ financial එකේ මොනවා හරි figures වෙන එක විතරයි. If it is current asset, if it is current ratio, what will happen? To the numerator, we will take current assets. To the denominator, we will consider current liabilities. Now you can see, if you need to improve this current ratio, then these are the options you are having. By keeping the current liabilities as it is, you can improve current assets, then the ratio will improve. Or else, while keeping the current assets as it is, you can decrease current liabilities, the ratio will improve, right? Or else, while increasing the current assets, if you can decrease your current liabilities, again the ratio will improve. If you increase your current assets in a higher rate than the increase in current liabilities, again your ratio can be improved. Or else, if you decrease current assets in a ratio lower than the decrease of current liabilities, again your current ratio can be improved. Only what appears in our numerator and denominator differs, but you can use this principle, you can use this general idea, you can apply this general idea to any of these given ratios, right? Okay, so we'll consider these ratios one by one. First, profitability ratios. Profitability ratios. First part. Profitability ratios. These ratios provide how profitable our business is. how profitable our business is. So what are the profitability ratios you know? What are the profitability ratios you know? What are the profitability ratios we can use? What is the primary profitability ratio? Primary profitability ratio is what? Pradhanatama profitability ratio එක මොකක්ද? That is considered to be return on capital employed. We denote it as ROCE. Return on capital employed. Return on capital employed, ROCE. So this is considered to be the primary profitability ratio. How can we compute this? How can we compute this? කොහොමද ROCE කැල් කරන්නේ? Return on capital employed. අපි දාපු capital එකට කොච්චර return එකක් එනවද? දාපු capital එකට අපි invest කරපු capital එකට කොච්චර return එකක් දෙන්න පුළුවන්ද? How much of the return can be generated from the capital that we have invested? Right? From the capital that we have employed. So that is the idea, general idea of this particular ratio. So here we consider to the numerator profit before interest and tax. Profit before interest and tax. What should be in the denominator? Capital employed. Capital employed. Capital employed. If we need to present this as a percentage, we need to multiply this by 100. Profit before interest and tax over capital employed. Capital employed, you know, there are two forms where we can, there are two forms of capital. What are those two forms? Capital එක හොයාගන්න පුළුවන් විදි දෙකයි. මොනවද මේ විදි දෙක? එකක් මොකක්ද? Equity capital and the other one is debt capital, right? Equity capital and debt capital. So how can we compute capital employed? Capital employed එතකොට ගන්න පුළුවන් කොහොමද? There are two forms of capital. What are those? Equity capital and debt capital. Equity capital එක ගන්න පුළුවන් equity වලින්. In the financial state, in the balance sheet, we have equity. So we can consider that. Plus debt capital කොතනද reflect වෙන්නේ? Debt capital is reflected under non-current liabilities. ඊගාව තියෙන සල්ලි ඉන්වෙස්ට් කරන්නත් පුළුවන් ණයට අරගෙන ඒකත් අපේ බිස්නස් එකට ඉන්වෙස්ට් කරන්න පුළුවන්. අපි දාපු සල්ලි පෙන්නන්නේ equity යටතේ ණයට ගත්තේව පෙන්නන්නේ කොතනද? Non-current liabilities යටතේ. So capital employed means the sum of those two, equity plus non-current liabilities. Right? Equity plus non-current liabilities. එතකොට අපි දාපු ඒවයි අපි loans අරගෙන debt capital විදිහට invest කරපු ඒවකින් කොච්චර profit එකක් අපි earn කරනවද? How much of a profit we earned? අපි 100ක් දැම්මොතින් in common using debt and equity capital. If we have invested 100 rupees, right, what is the profit we can earn per year? අවුරුද්දට අපිට ඒකෙන් කීයක profit එකක් earn කරන්න පුළුවන්ද කියන idea එක තමයි ROCE එකෙන් දෙන්නේ. මං ගාව තියෙන රුපියල් 80කුයි මගේ යාළුවෙක්ගෙන් මම ණයට අරගෙන 20කුයි එකතු කරලා 100ක් business එකට දැම්මොත් මට අවුරුද්ද ඉවර වෙද්දී කීයක් ඒ business එකෙන් ගන්න පුළුවන්ද profit විදිහට. Right? So that is the idea. ROCE, return on capital employed. What are the other profitability ratios? What are the other profitability ratios? What else we can have? This one, ROE. What do you mean by that? Return on equity, right? Return on equity. Return on equity. So how can we compute this one? Return on equity. From the words you can derive the function, derive the formula. Return on equity. Api invest karapu naththam return on equity. එතකොට යට ඉන්නේ කවුද? Shareholders equity. Shareholder equity. Shareholders කට අයිති equity එක. Return on equity. Right? What should be in the numerator then? Profit after tax veiling, we need to exclude if we have paid any preference dividends. Right? Preference dividends. If we have paid any preference dividends, that we need to exclude from profit after tax. Profit after tax, or we can say profit for the year or net profit, both are the same. From that, we need to deduct preference dividends by shareholders equity, right? Ordinary shareholders la we are considering. The ordinary shareholders key profits per year. That is the idea of this ratio. If we need to express as a percentage, we need to multiply this by 100. Return on equity. Methana capital employed. Equity plus the debt capital, non-current liabilities. Here, the equity shareholders. Right? Equity shareholders. Why here interest and tax are ignored? Why we consider profit before interest and tax? Non-current liabilities. Tut make asse tiyena capital employed kiwata passe NCL එකක් තියෙනවා. Non-current liabilities තුත් තියෙනවා. එතකොට එයාලට ඕනේ එයාලා ගෙවන interest එක මේකෙන් අඩු වෙනවට. Right? Tax also that will differ, right? That may differ from year to year. Government change, tax rules, sectors, tax rates. So these are out of the control of the business. Business control even interest, that one we include because we have non-current liabilities here. So they are given expense reasonable. That is why we are considering profit before interest and tax. But here we have what? Purely the equity capital. Equity capital. Right. What are the other profitability ratios? Right. GP margin, we called it as gross profit margin. How can we compute that? Gross profit margin. Gross profit over sales. Gross profit over sales. We usually present it as a percentage. That is why we need to multiply it by 100. Right? Gross profit over sales. What is the idea of this? GP margin. This is the idea of GP margin. Gross profit of GP margin of 30%, GP margin of 40%, GP margin of 20%. What is the idea behind that? Right? What is the idea behind that? Out of this sales, once we allocated the cost of sales, we have earned that much of profit. Right? That profit we can use for the rest of the expenses. For an example, if we have a 30% GP margin, if we have done sales worth of 100, now we have 30 as gross profit. අපි 100ක sale එකක් කරා නම් දැන් අපේ gross profit එක විදිහට කීයක් තියෙනවද? 30ක් තියෙනවා. මේ 30 අපිට පාවිච්චි කරන්න පුළුවන් මොකටද? To pay off our administration expenses, to pay off our distribution expenses, to pay off our other expenses, right? To pay interest, we can utilize this 30 out. Apart from that, to pay off dividends also, we can make use of that. එතකොට මෙන්න මේ expenses ටික සහ dividends ගෙවන්න අපේ company මෙන්න මෙච්චර profit එකක් තියෙනවා කියන idea එක තමයි GP margin එකෙන් දෙන්නේ. Right? So that is the idea behind the GP margin. If we done this much of sales, this percentage will remain for us to make the other expenses as well as to pay off dividends. Right? GP margin. Right. What else? What are the other profitability ratios? We can have what else? Net profit margin. Net profit margin. We can say NP margin. Net profit margin equals what? Equals net profit over sales. Net profit over sales into 100. එතකොට මේකේ idea එක මොකක්ද? GP margin එක 30% ඇවිල්ලා net profit margin එක 5% එනවා. What is the idea of this 5%? What is the idea of this 5%? To pay off dividends, if we have done a sale worth of 100, still 5 remains for us to make dividends. අපි 100ක sale එකක් කරොතින් ඔක්කොම expenses දරලා ඉවර වෙලා දැන් අපි ගාව තව ඒකෙන් රුපියල් 5ක් තියෙනවා. මේ 5 පාවිච්චි කළා මොකක් කරන්න පුළුවන්ද? අපිට dividends ගෙවන්න පුළුවන්. dividends ගෙවනම නම් තව අපි ගාව 5ක් තියෙනවා. 100ක sale කරතින් තව 5ක් ඉතුරු වෙලා තියෙනවා අපිට dividends ගෙවන්න. That is the idea of this net profit margin. Net profit margin. Then what else? There are so many. I will consider this one. GP margin, net profit margin, operating profit margin, operating profit. For the same can be said as PBIT margin, profit before interest and tax. Profit before interest and tax give what? Operating profit give what? Take margin. How to compute that one then? Operating profit, or we can say profit before interest and tax over sales into 100. Into 100. Operating profit margin. If our operating profit margin is 10%, it means what? Our operating profit margin එක 10ක් කියලා આવතින් ඒකේ අදහස මොකද්ද? අපි 100ක sales කරතින් තව අපිට ඒකෙන් 10ක් ඉතුරු වෙලා තියෙනවා. මොකක් කරන්නද? අපේ interest expenses, tax expenses සහ dividends ගෙවන්න. අපේ බදු වියදම්, right? අපේ පොලි වියදම් සහ අනිත් ලාභාංශ ගෙවන්න අපිට මේ කරපු sale එකෙන් තව 10ක් ඉතුරු වෙලා තියෙනවා. It is the idea of operating profit margin, or we call PBIT margin. Right. So these are the main or key profitability ratios. Right? Key profitability ratios. Then the second category, solvency ratios. Solvency ratios. I have explained you the difference between solvency and liquidity. Right? Solvency ratios. The ability of the company to pay off its debts. ණය ගෙවන්න තියෙන හැකියාව. කොච්චර ඉක්මනට ගෙවන්න පුළුවන්ද නම් මොකද බලන්න ඕන. Liquidity ratios. ගෙවන්න හැකියාව තියෙනවද නැද්ද කියලා බලන්න නම් solvency ratios. Solvency ratios. I will take 5 here. First one, debt ratio. Right? Debt ratio. Debt ratio. How to compute that? That is total debts over total assets. total debts over total assets. So we make it as a percentage. So we need to multiply this by 100. Total debts over total assets. So what is the rule of thumb here? Normally it is generally accepted to maintain a debt ratio of 50%. Right? It's generally accepted to maintain a debt ratio of 50%. يعني අපි ගාව 100ක වත්කම් තියෙනවා නම් සාමාන්‍යයෙන් 50ක විතර debts තිබ්බට කමක් නැහැ. We can manage that. Right? Company is in a good position. What else? Debt ratio, and we have gearing ratio. Gearing ratio. How to compute this gearing ratio? Gearing ratio, that is debt divided by equity plus debt. Equity plus debt. Equity means what? The equity capital we introduce to the business. Debt means the debt capital we introduce to the business. So this is what? The total capital we have employed. Out of the total capital we have employed, what proportion does it represent debts? Api company ke invest karpu amount වලින් කොච්චර percentage එකක් right debt වලින් represent වෙනවද? represent කරනවද කියන එක. Gearing ratio. Based on the gearing ratios, we can classify the businesses into three main groups. Based on this gearing ratio, we can classify businesses into three main groups. Right? Three main groups. There are low geared companies. Low geared companies means those who maintain a gearing ratio of less than 50%. Less than 50%. Right? Low geared company. සාමාන්‍යයෙන් gearing ratio එක company එක 150ට වඩා අඩුයි නම්. ඒ කියන්නේ අපි introduce කරපු capital එක equity capital එක තියෙනවා 60 අපි ණය අරන් තියෙන්නේ 40යි. 150ට වඩා අඩුයි. Low geared company. And for medium, or we can say average geared company, if it is around 50%. Average geared company, if it is around 50%. It is around 50%, we can say it is medium geared or average geared company. If it is greater than 50%, then that is considered as a highly geared company. Gearing ratio. So the general accepted level is 50%. It can be maintained around 50%, then it is accepted, but that again depends on the nature of the business. Right? From manufacturing businesses to banking businesses, these ratios can be different. The industry norms can be different. Then another solvency ratio is interest cover. That is calculated by dividing the profit before interest and tax by the finance cost or interest. Finance cost. Right? The answer will be in types. එතකොට අපි ගෙවන interest එක වගේ කී ගුණයක් අපි profit earn කරනවද? අපි ගෙවන interest එක වගේ අපි දරන finance cost එක වගේ key ගුණයක්, how many times we are earning profit, right, compared to the finance cost that we incur. අපි දරන interest expense එක වගේ key ගුණයක profit හොයනවද? එතකොට මේ ratio එක වැඩි වෙන තරමටද හොඳ අඩු වෙන තරමටද? වැඩි වෙන තරමට හොඳ. Right. So these are the solvency ratios. Right. There can be some other. So these are the three main solvency ratios that are frequently being used: debt ratio, gearing ratio, and interest cover ratio. What is better? What is better? Highly geared වෙන එකද නැත්නම් වැඩිපුර ණය ගන්න එක හොඳයිද නැද්ද? Right? If we obtain so much of loans, what will happen? If we obtain so much of loans for our company to run our business, if we have obtained so much of loans, what will happen? අපි ඕනමටත් වඩා වැඩිපුර ණය ගත්තොත් මොකක්ද වෙන්නේ? Two things. There are mainly two impacts will be there. First one is what? එකක් මොකද්ද? වැඩිපුර ණය ගන්නවා කියලා කියන්නේ අනිත් පැත්තෙන් මොකක් කරන්න වෙනවද? අපිට වැඩිපුර පොලි ගෙවන්න වෙනවා. We have to incur a huge interest expense. Huge interest expense means what happen? Our profit will be eroded as a result of that. වැඩිපුර පොලි ගෙවනවා කියලා කියන්නේ අපේ අන්තිමට net profit එක මොකද්ද වෙන්නේ? Net profit එක අඩු වෙනවා. That is one impact if we go on for higher debts, right? If we are highly geared, if we go on for higher debts, that is one adverse impact. What else? අනිත් පැත්තේ මොකද්ද වෙන්නේ? අනිත් පැත්තේ මොකද්ද? අනිත් පැත්තෙන් බැංකු, right? When obtaining loans, we need to provide our financial statements to these banks and lending companies. So then by looking at this, if we have obtained so much of loans, if our business is running through loans, if we are heavily debt, right? If we incur heavy debts, if we have obtained so much of debts, then the banks or the lending companies will refuse to issue us loans. අපි ගොඩක් loans අරගෙන තියෙනවා නම් එතකොට බැංකුව හිතනවා තව loan ගත්තොත් මේක මෙයාලට ගෙවා ගන්න පුළුවන්ද? So they are in a doubt. So they may refuse to provide additional loans. තව loans දෙන එක ප්‍රතික්ෂේප කරන්න පුළුවන්. reject කරන්න පුළුවන්. Like what has happened to Sri Lanka. ගන්න පුළුවන් හැමතැනින්ම අරගෙන මොකක් වෙලා තියෙන්නේ? තවත් ගන්න බෑ. ඉල්ලුවට කවුරුවත් දෙන්නේ නැහැ. ඒකයි කාගෙන් ගන්නද? බංග්ලාදේශයෙන් ඕමානෙන් ගන්න එක. Right? So the same will happen to a company. The same thing is happening to a country. Right? So those are the adverse effects of having too much of debts. ඕනකට වඩා වැඩිපුර අපි debts ගත්තොත් ණය ගත්තොත් company එකට වෙන්න පුළුවන් දේ. දැන් අපි debt ratios ඕනකට වඩා වැඩි වුණොත් වෙන්න පුළුවන් දේ. If we take the other way around, no. If we take debts, we need to pay interest. So we are not going to take debts. We do not need debts to run our business. ඔය decision එකේ හිටියොත් මොකක්ද වෙන්නේ? ඔය decision එකේ හිටියොත් මොකක්ද වෙන්නේ? ණය ගන්න බෑ. ණය ගත්තොත් අපිට පොලි ගෙවන්න වෙනවා. එතකොට අපේ profit එක අඩු වෙනව නේද? කියන ඔය attitude එකේ හිටියොත් business එකක් what will happen? Right? Their expansion will be limited. Here business එකක් විදියට grow වෙන්න තියෙන opportunity එක. The opportunity to grow that business will be limited, will be restricted. Right? හිතන්න earlier we have discussed about this ROC, return on capital employed. How to compute? Profit before interest and tax over capital employed into 100. Assume this particular company has a ROCE ratio of 20%. ඒ කියන්නේ එයා capital එක introduce කරොත් 100ක් දැම්මොත් 20ක profit එකක් එනවා. 200ක් දැම්මොත් 40ක profit එකක් එනවා. ROCE. එතකොට අපි if we can obtain loans at 10%, අපිට 100ට 10ක loans ගන්න පුළුවන් නම් 100ට 10 rate එකට loans ගන්න පුළුවන් නම් මොකද්ද? ඔතනින් තව මෙතනට capital introduce කරත් මොකක් කරන්න පුළුවන්? අපිට තව profits හොයන්න පුළුවන්. We can earn more profits. 100ට 10ට අරගෙන අපි 100ට 20ක් හොයනවා කියලා කියන්නේ එතනම අපිට net impact එකක් කීයක net impact එකක් තියෙනවද? 100ට 10ක net impact එකක් තියෙනවා. අපි loans විදියට රුපියල් 100ක් අරගෙන company එකට දැම්මොත් කීයක් earn කරනවද? 20ක් earn කරනවා. profit before interest and tax. ඔය 20 මෙයාලට ඕන 10 ගෙව්වත් අපිට තව 10ක් අපි ගාව ඉතුරුයි. Right? So this we can again reinvest profit. So if we are not gone into debts, if we are not obtaining debts, right? If we are not obtaining debts, that can limit our growth, that can limit the expansion of the business. It's a loan ගන්න නැතුව ඉන්න එකක් නෙවෙයි, ඕනවට වඩා වැඩිපුර ගන්න එකක් නෙවෙයි. මොකද කරන්න ඕන? ඒක optimum level එකෙන් maintain කරන්න ඕන. Right? The debts need to be maintained at optimum level. Company එකට දාන්න පුළුවන්, expand company එක grow කරන්න පුළුවන් level එකකට debts මොකක් කරන්න ඕනද? Maintain කරන්න ඕන. That is the requirement. Right. Then the third category. Third category is liquidity ratios. Liquidity ratios. So what is the difference between solvency ratios and liquidity ratios? This provides us the idea of how well, right, how capable the company in paying off its debts. ණය ගෙවන්න කොච්චර හැකියාවක් තියෙනවද? In liquidity ratios, what? How quickly the company can pay off its debts. How quickly, කොච්චර ඉක්මනට ණය ගෙවන්න හැකියාවක් මේ කම්පැනියට තියෙනවද? Liquidity ratios. මම කලින් ගත්ත example එක. This is A, this is B. B has so much of lands. මෙයාගේ නමට ඉඩම් සෑහෙන අරන් තියෙනවා. ලක්ෂ 5ක loan එකක් ගන්නවා. 5 lakhs. මෙයාට ගෙවන්න හැකියාව තියෙනවද නැත්ද? තියෙනවා. එයා ගාව ඕන තරමක් වත්කම් තියෙනවා මේ asset එක ගෙවන්න. මේ ණය ගෙවන්න. Solvency is there. හැබැයි මෙයා ගාව bank එකේ හරි අතේ හරි සල්ලි නැහැ. Current assets නැහැ. එතකොට මොකද වෙන්නේ? ගෙවන්න පුළුවන් තමයි. හැබැයි ඉක්මනට ගෙවා ගන්න බෑ. Solvency එක තියෙනවා. මොකක් නැද්ද? Liquidity එක නැහැ. Right? Solvency and liquidity, the difference. The ability to pay off its debts, the company's debts, that is coming under solvency. How quickly the company can pay off its debts, that is coming under liquidity. Right? That is coming under liquidity. There are two main ratios coming under liquidity. You know what? Current ratio and fixed asset ratio. Fixed asset ratio, we can say asset ratio. What are they say? Asset ratio. Current ratio, how can we compute that? Easy. But current assets need to be divided by current liabilities. Current assets need to be divided by current liabilities. What is the rule of thumb? What is the generally accepted level when it comes to current ratio? Because the generally accepted level, like companies try to maintain a current ratio of 2:1. Liabilities Cයක් තියෙනවා නම් current liabilities Cයක් තියෙනවා නම් current assets කීයක් maintain වෙන්න ඕනද? 200ක්. That is the rule of thumb. මේ level එකේ ඉන්නවා නම් then it is considered that the company has a sound liquidity. The company is in a good liquidity position. Company liquidity එක හොඳයි. Current liabilities වලට වඩා current assets තියෙනවා නම්, especially if they can maintain 2:1 ratio, then it is good. Right? The company's liquidity position is sound. That is good. Then quick asset ratio or asset ratio, how to compute that one? From the current assets, we need to deduct inventories, right? And prepayments if there is any. Then divide this by current liabilities. Current assets වල inventories වල liquidity ගතිය පොඩ්ඩක් අඩුයි. ඒක නිසා එයත් අයින් කරලා highly liquid assets අපි ගන්නවා. when computing quick asset ratio or asset test ratio, we consider the most highly liquid assets. So that is why we are excluding, we are removing inventory values here and the prepayments also, prepayments as well. But ගොඩක් ඉක්මනට අපිට liquidate කරන්න පුළුවන් assets විතරයි මෙතන consider වෙන්නේ. What is the rule of thumb here? Fixed asset ratio need to be maintained at 1:1. Because CA current liabilities තියෙනවා නම් fixed assets තුත් CA එක තියෙන්න ඕන කියන rough idea එක. That is the general idea. Fourth category, that is efficiency ratios. Efficiency ratios. Right. So this provides us insights on how well we use our assets, right? How well we use our assets in the business, in the company. So what are the efficiency ratios? What are the efficiency ratios? First one, we have inventory turnover ratio, right? Inventory turnover ratio. Inventory turnover. How to compute inventory turnover ratio? How to compute inventory turnover ratio? Inventory turnover. So this provides that how many times, right? How many times we have, how many times within the given period we have sold the inventory. අපි දෙන period එක ඇතුළත කොච්චර වතාවක් inventory එක අපේ එළියට ගිහිල්ලා තියෙන නැත්නම් අපේ inventories විකිනිලා තියෙනවද, right? Assume we purchase a stock, then we sell it again, we purchase a stock, we sell it, we purchase a stock, we sell it. Likewise, how many times within the given period, we are considering it for a year, within the year how many times our inventory has been sold, right? Inventory turnover. How can we compute that? That is, right, cost of sales divided by average inventory. Cost of sales divided by average inventory. Why average inventory? Why average inventory? So this usually we doesn't represent as a percentage, right? The answer will be in times. Key වතාවක් කියන එකට උත්තරේ නෙමෙයි එන්නේ. 4 වතාවක්, 5 වතාවක්. Likewise, we have the answer in terms of times, 4 times, 6 times, 7 times, likewise. So my question, why we need to consider average inventory instead of inventory, ending balance? Why? අපි closing inventory balance එක ගන්න නැතුව average inventory balance එක ගන්න. So how to take this average inventory balance? How can we take that? Opening balance plus closing balance over 2. How can average කියන්නේ? Opening එකයි closing එකයි එකතු කරලා දෙකෙන් බෙදා average. So rather than going for the closing balance, why we are going for the average inventory? If it is not provided in the sum, that is a different story. But in normal circumstances, we consider average inventory. Why is that? See, in the numerator, what we have? Cost of sales. This is the amount at the end of a particular period, or is this represent the amount during a period? මේ cost of sales කියලා කියන්නේ මොකක් හරි නිශ්චිත දවසකට තියෙන figure එකක්ද, එහෙම නැත්නම් period එකට අදාළ figure එකක්ද? This is the amount relevant for a period during the financial year. This much of cost of sales incurred by the company. Period එකට අදාළ value එකක්. Closing inventory එකක් ගත්තොත් it reflects what? The balance as at the end of the financial year, right? එතකොට මෙයාත් එක්ක මෙයා match වෙන්න ඕන. That is why we are considering an average, not just only the ending balance. That is why we are considering average, right? එහෙම නැතුව ගත්තොත් මොකක්ද වෙන්නේ? ending balance එක ගත්තොත් මොකද වෙන්නේ? මෙයා period එකකට අදාළ value එක මෙයා financial year end date එකට balance එක. ඒක tally වෙන්නේ නැහැ. හරියටම reflect වෙන්නේ නැහැ අපිට ඕන දේ. That is why we are considering the average inventory. Right. Average inventory. Inventory turnover, what is better for a company? Higher number of inventory turnover or a lower number of inventory turnover? What is better? Inventory turnover එක වැඩි වෙන එකද හොඳ අඩු වෙන එකද? But in a times ගාන නෙන්න උත්තරයක් විදියට times ගාන වැඩි වෙන එකද හොඳ අඩු වෙන එකද? Inventory turnover එකකින් මොකක්ද කියවෙන්නේ? කොච්චර වාර ගණනක් sales වෙනවද? අපේ inventory එක කොච්චර වාර ගණනක් විකිරෙනවද? එතකොට විකිරෙන වාර ගණන මොකක් වෙන තරමට හොඳයිද? වැඩි වෙන තරමට හොඳයි. A higher number is preferred. Higher inventory turnover is preferred. What else? What are the other efficiency ratios? We have receivable turnover. Receivable turnover. We can say debtors turnover. Debtors turnover. Debtors turnover. How to compute that one? Debtors turnover, like what we have considered here when computing inventory turnover, average inventory. Therefore, what we should consider here? We need to consider average debtors. Average debtors. What should be in the numerator? What should be in the numerator? උඩ ඉන්න ඕන මොකද්ද? ඇයි debtors ඇති වෙන්නේ? ණය ගැතියෝ ඇති වෙන්නේ ඇයි? How the debtors incur? ඇයි ණය ගැතියෝ ඇති වෙන්නේ? Because of what? Because of credit sales. Credit sales. So credit sales need to be divided by average debtors. Right? Credit sales need to be divided by average debtors. Debtors turnover, or we can say receivable turnover. Right. So what is the idea of this receivable turnover? What is the idea of this ratio? But debtors turnover ki idea එක මොකක්ද? What is the idea behind the debtors turnover? This is how we can calculate the debtors turnover. So what is the idea behind this? How many times the debtors paying cash for us within a given period? If it is a financial year, within that financial year, how many times the debtors paying cash for us? Then a period එක ඇතුළත කී වතාවක් අපිට debtors ට සල්ලි ගෙවනවද කියන එක තමයි debtors turnover එකෙන් එන්නේ, right? Or receivable turnover. How many times the debtors paying cash for us during the given period? 3 times, 5 times, 7 times. So the answer will be in times. How many times the debtors are paying cash for us within the given period? Receivable turnover. And the payable, or else we can say creditors turnover. Creditors turnover. Payable turnover, or else we can say creditors turnover. How can we compute that? When computing inventory turnover, what we consider to the denominator? Average inventory. When computing receivable or debtors turnover, we consider average debtors. Likewise, what we need to consider here? When computing creditors turnover, we need to consider what? Average creditors. Average creditors. Average creditors. Creditors ඇති වෙන්නේ ඇයි? How these creditors are being formed? ණය හිමියෝ ඇති වෙන්නේ කොහොමද? මොකක් කරාමද? ණය හිමියෝ ඇති වෙන්නේ අපි ණයට භාණ්ඩ මිලදී ගත්ත. ණයට ගත්තා. Right? Credit purchase. credit purchase. Credit purchase. Credit purchase over average creditors. Efficiency ratios. So here we can compute the periods or the number of days. Periods. Right? For an example, this provides us the inventory turnover. How many times a year we do sales? Our inventory is being sold. Inventory ka key watawak අවුරුද්දක් ඇතුළත sale වෙනවද කියන එක තමයි inventory turnover එකෙන් කියන්නේ. Right? Then again we can compute inventory turnover period, or we can say inventory period. Inventory turnover period. Inventory turnover period. So how can we compute that one? There what we need to do is we need to interchange the captions in this numerator and denominator. So once we interchange, how it looks like? We need to take average inventory to the numerator. Divide this by cost of sales. If we need the answer in days, we multiply this by 365. Inventory turnover period. Average inventory cost of sales. If we need the answer in days, multiply it by 365. So what is the idea behind this one? Inventory turnover periods. So remember that is two stuff. If it is inventory turnover, this is how we compute that. If it is inventory turnover period, this is the way that we need to compute it. If it is inventory, it means how many times within a given period that our inventory has been sold. Here, what is the idea? What is the idea behind inventory turnover period? The answer will be in days. 30 days, 35 days, 40 days, likewise. Something in days. So what is the idea behind that? අපේ ඉන්වෙන්ටරි එක කොච්චර කාලයක් ස්ටෝර්ස් වල තියෙනවද කියන එක. මෙතන 10 කියලා උත්තරය ආව කියලා කියන්නේ දවස් 10ක් අපේ ඉන්වෙන්ටරි එක ස්ටෝර්ස් වල තියෙනව විකිනෙන්නේ නැතුව. 15ක් කියලා උත්තරය ආව කියලා කියන්නේ if the answer is 15 days, it means 15 days. For 15 days the inventory will remain at our stock. Stores වල දවස් 15ක් එක තියෙයි. දවස් 20ක් තියෙයි. අපි ස්ටෝර්ස් වල කී දවසක් කොච්චර දවසක් තියෙනවද කියන එක තමයි මෙතනින් එන්නේ. Right? Average inventory turnover period. Here also we can compute the period. Receivable turnover period, or we say debtors collection period. Collection period. Right? Debtors collection period. How can we compute that? If we need the answer in days, what we do? We interchange the numerator and denominator. Here, then it should be what? Average debtors need to be divided by credit sales. Credit sales into 365. 365. So what is the idea behind this collection period? Debtors collection period එකනේ මේ එන්නේ. එතන තියෙන්නේ දවස් ගන්න. දවස් 10යි, දවස් 12යි, 13යි, likewise we will get something in days. So what is the idea behind this? මෙතනින් A එන උත්තරේ මොකද අදහස? What does it implies? එකෙන් අදහස මොකක්ද? Debtors collection period. අපි ණයට බඩු විකුණලා එයාගෙන් ඒ ණය සල්ලි එකතු කරගන්න දවස් කීයක් යනවද කියන එක. අපි ණයට විකුණනම මොකක් ඇති වෙනවද? ණය ගැතියෙක් ඇති වෙනවා. ඒ ණයගැතිය මොකක් කරන්න ඕනද? අදාළ ණය පියවන්න ඕන. එහෙනම් ඒ අදාළ ණය පියවන්න ඒ ණයගැතිය කොච්චර දවසක් ගන්නවද? Right? The general figure is provided using this. Average debtors over credit sales into 365. How many days a debtor takes us to pay off its debts? ණයගැතිය එයාගේ ණය ගෙවන්න කොච්චර කාලයක් ගන්නවද කියන එක. Right? Collection period. Debtors collection period. Then here we can compute the creditors payable period. Creditors payable period or creditors payment period. How can we compute that? Again, we need to interchange the numerator and denominator. Average creditors need to be divided by credit purchase. Credit purchase. If we need the answer in days, we need to multiply this by 365. 365. Hey, 360ට බහම ගන්න. අවුරුද්දට දවස් සාමාන්‍යයෙන් කීයද? 365. So what is the idea behind this? What is the idea behind this? Creditors payment period. What is the idea behind this creditors payment period? Again, the answer will be something in days. 22 days, 35 days, 37 days, likewise. What is the idea of that? අපි ණයට බාණ්ඩ මිලදී ගන්නවා. එතකොට අපි කවුද? Right? අපි ණයට බාණ්ඩ මිලදී ගත්තම ඇති වෙන්නේ කවුද? ණය හිමියෝ. එතකොට අපි අර ණය හිමියන්ට සල්ලි ගෙවන්න කොච්චර කාලයක් ගන්නවද? මම ABC කම්පැනි එක නම් මම XYZ කම්පැනි එකෙන් ණයක් ගත්තොතින් ණයක් මොකද්ද? එයාලගේ ණයට බාණ්ඩ තොගයක් ගත්තොතින් ඒ අදාළ ණය ගෙවන්න මම කොච්චර කාලයක් ගන්නවද? ණය හිමියන්ට ගෙවන්න කොච්චර කාලයක් ගන්නවද කියන එක. Right? How many time does it take to pay off the creditors? Creditors ට ගෙවන්න කොච්චර කාලයක් ගන්නවද කියන එක. Right? Creditors payment period. So these are the efficiency ratios. Efficiency ratios. Based on these efficiency ratios, we can compute the cash cycle, or the same we can say operating cycle. Operating cycle. How to compute that? That is inventory turnover period. Inventory turnover period plus debtors collection period. Debtors collection period minus creditors payment period. Creditors payment period. Creditors payment period. Right? So this is how we can compute the cash cycle. Inventory turnover period may be 10 days. Debtors collection inventory turnover period 10 days. It means what? The inventory will remain at our stores for 10 days. Beginning නැතුව දවස් 10ක් inventory එක අපේ stores වල තියෙනවා. 10 days. Debtors collection period 20 days. Again, අපි ණයට විකුණලා ණය ගැතියෝගේ සල්ලි ලැබෙන්න අපිට දවස් 20ක් යනවා. ණයට විකුණලා දවස් 20ක් යනවා ණය ගැතියෝගෙන් සල්ලි ලැබෙන්න. Debtors collection period minus creditors payment period. ණයට බඩු අරගෙන ඒ ණය ගෙවන්න අපිට කොච්චර දවසක් යනවද කියන එක. Assume 15 days. Right? We take 15 days. Creditors payment period. ණයට බඩු අරගෙන ඒ ණය ගෙවන්න දවස් 15ක් අපි ගන්නවා. So then what is the cash cycle? What is the operating cycle? The answer will be in days. 10 plus 20, 30, 30 minus 15, 50. 15 days. So what is the idea of that 15 days? ඒකට උත්තරේ ඉදිරියට එන දවස් 15යි කියන එකේ අදහස මොකක්ද? අපේ බිස්නස් එක සයිකල් එකක් නේ. ණයට ගන්නවා, ඊට පස්සේ raw materials ගන්නවා, අපි finish good එකක් හදනවා, stores වලට දානවා, ඒක ණයට විකුණනවා, ණය ගෙතියන්ගෙන් සල්ලි ලැබෙනවා, ඒකෙන් ආයේ ණය හිමියන්ට ගෙවනවා, ආයේ raw materials ණයට ගන්නවා. This goes as a cycle. Right? එතකොට ඔය cycle එකේ අපි දවස් 15ක් will remain as out of pocket situation. Cash business එකේ නැතුව දවස් 15ක් දුවනවා කියන එක තමයි. business එක cash නැතුව දවස් 15ක් cycle එකේ කරගෙනම කියන එක තමයි ඔතනින් වෙන්නේ. Right? Cash cycle or the operating cycle. Out of the pocket situation. How many days does this business run without adequate cash? Cash නැතුව දවස් කීයක් run කරනවද කියන එක. In its operating cycle, right? Okay, so that is about efficiency ratios. The last category is investment ratios. Investment, or we say this as market ratios. Market ratios. Again, there are a lot of investment ratios, but I will consider only few here, right? The most important part. Investment ratios, what is one of the key investment ratio is what? We have a separate accounting standards for this one as well. What is that? What is that? That is EPS, earnings per share. What is the accounting standard relevant for EPS? That is LKAS 33. LKAS 33. So as per LKAS 33, how can we compute earnings per share? Earnings per share calculate කොහොමද? How to compute earnings per share? That is what? මේක අපි කතා කරලා තියෙනවා. In detail, we have discussed this. Net profit වලින් අඩු කරනවා මොකද්ද? If we have paid any preference dividends, we need to deduct that. Net profit minus preference dividend, right? Preference dividends divided by weighted average number of ordinary shares. Weighted average number of ordinary shares. Preference dividends කියන්නේ ordinary shareholders ට ගෙවන එකක් නෙවෙයි. That is why we need to especially exclude that from the numerator, from net profit. Earnings per share, net profit minus preference dividends over weighted average number of ordinary shares. In detail, we have discussed this under case 33. What else? What else? What else? We have this ratio, PE ratio, or we call this price per earnings. Price per earnings. From the term itself, you can derive the equation. What it should be? Price per earning. Share price divided by earnings per share. Earnings per share. Share price එක Colombo Stock Exchange එකෙන් බලා ගන්න පුළුවන්. මෙදාට කීයද likewise daily we can see the updates in the share price. If that divided by the earnings per share, we can have the PE ratio, price per earnings ratio. What does that reflect? What does that reflect? PE ratio can reflect when price per earnings. That is the confidence of the business, confidence of the company growth potential, right? Company growth potential is reflected in the PE ratio. company's growth potential. අට කොච්චර ඉස්සරහට තව කොච්චර දුරට grow වෙන්න විභවතාවයක් හැකියාවක් තියෙනවද කියන එක. Right? Earnings per share, assume that is 2. Earnings per share, right? That is 2 rupees per share. Share price is 4. Curry company එක share price එක දැන් රුපියල් 4යි යන්නේ. එයාගේ earnings per share එක 2යි. share එකක් ගත්තොත් ඒකෙන් earn කරන්න පුළුවන් රුපියල් 2ක්. Right? Earnings per share and share price. So by dividing 4 by 2, what we get? 2. By dividing the share price by EPS, we get the PE ratio of what? 2. So what is the idea behind that 2? The company has the potential to grow up its business twice as of its current state. දැන් තියෙනා වගේ දෙගුණයක් මේක එයාලට මොකක් කරන්න පුළුවන්ද? වර්ධනය කරගන්න පුළුවන්. That is the idea. Right? The growth potential. If we get something like 5, it means what? 5 times the current state, the company has the potential to grow. Then තියෙනා වගේ 5 ගුණයකින් වර්ධනය වෙන්න යාලට හැකියාවක් විභවතාවයක් තියෙනවා කියන එක. PE ratio, right? Price per earnings ratio. And what else? Dividend yield. Dividend yield. Dividend yield. How to compute dividend yield? That is, dividend per share needs to be divided by share price. Dividend per share needs to be divided by share price. And හිතන්න මෙහෙම ABC කියන company එක. Right. I am going to purchase 100 shares at 10 rupees each. Shares 100ක් ගන්න යන්නේ එකක් 10 ගන්න. Right. එතකොට මගේ investment එක කීයද? 1000යි. මගේ investment එක 1000යි. Shares 100ක් 10 ගානේ ගන්න යන්නේ. එතකොට මගේ investment එක 1000යි. Right. හිතන්න මෙයාලා එක share එකකට dividend ගෙවනවා රුපියල් 2ක්. Dividend per share. On an average, they pays 2 rupees per share. එක share එකකට රුපියල් 2ක dividend එකක් ගෙවනවා. එතකොට මට මේ අවුරුද්දට සම්පූර්ණ හම්බ වෙන dividend එක කීයද? එක share එකකට 2යි. shares මං ගාව 100ක් තියෙනවා. ඒ කියන්නේ මට 200ක් dividend හම්බ වෙනවා. Right? එතකොට dividend yield එක කීයද? Dividend yield එක කීයද? If we express this as a percentage, that is 20%. 20%. It means by investing 1,000 rupees or by investing 100 rupees, I can earn dividend income of 20%. මට ඔය company එකේ 100ක් ගම්මුතින් 20ක dividend income එකක් ගන්න පුළුවන්. Right? Dividend yield. That is the idea behind dividend yield. Dividend per share divided by share price. Key මෙච්චර වෙන්න මේ share price එක තියෙන එකේ invest කළොත් මට කීයක් ගන්න පුළුවන්ද? ඔය business එකේ invest කළොත් කීයක් ගන්න පුළුවන්ද? Right? In terms of dividends. In terms of dividends. Right. Then I will take one more here. Right. Dividend cover. Dividend cover. That can be computed by dividing the earnings per share by dividend per share. By dividing the earnings per share by dividend per share. And earnings per share by dividend per share. And assume here the earnings per share value is 2. Earnings per share value is 2. EPS. EPS over DPS is what we known as dividend cover. Assume the EPS value is 2 and DPS value is to be 1. Dividend per share. The share eකට සාමාන්‍යයෙන් dividend ගෙවන්නේ රුපියලයි. Earnings per share තියෙනවා 2. Per share the company could earn 2 rupees, right? And they pay dividend 1 rupees per share. It means what? ඒ කියන්නේ company 100ක් earn කළොත් 50ක් මොකක් විදියට ගෙවනවද? 50 will be declared as dividend. If the company has earned 100 rupees, they will declare 50% of that as dividend. Company එක earn කරන එකෙන් භාගයක් dividend විදියට යාලා declare කරනවා කියන එක. Right? Dividend cover. Dividend cover. So these are the key ratios that you need to know at this level. Right? Key ratios. It's not working. Key ratios that you need to know. What are the 5? We have discussed 5 main categories. What are those? Profitability ratios. What else? Solvency ratios, liquidity ratios, and efficiency ratios. And at last we have discussed on investment or market ratios. Right. Okay, so far what I have discussed was the summary of this note which I have provided to you. Right? Financial statement analysis. The purpose of analyzing financial statement is to what? Is to make better decisions. To whom? To users. Users, there are 2 types, as internal and external. Right? And there are different techniques which we can use to analyze financial statements, like vertical analysis, horizontal analysis, trend analysis, common size analysis, as well as ratio analysis. So here our main focus is on ratio analysis, right? And here the calculation of ratios can help with the analysis of financial statements. That is one technique we can use to analyze the financial statements. Then what it has mentioned. This is then compared with the same ratio for any of the same company in a different year, a different company in the same year, or the industry average. Assume ABC company has a GP margin of 15% for the financial year 2019-20. ABC company has a GP margin of 15% for the financial year 2019-20. Does this reflect anything? Is it meaningful? No, right? අපිට නිකන් තනි ෆිගර් එකක් දිහා බලලා අපිට ඩිසිෂන්ස් ගන්න බෑ. අපිට කිව්වොතින් GP එක gross profit margin එක දිහා බලලා ඩිසිෂන් එක ගන්න කියලා අපිට එක අවුරුද්දක මේ තනි ෆිගර් එක දිහා බලලා ඩිසිෂන්ස් ගන්න බෑ. It would not be effective. We should able to do what? We should able to compare this with something else. Compare කරන්න පුළුවන් වෙනවා. We should able to compare. Then only we know whether we have improved or whether we are doing right bad. That understanding can be taken after we compare this with something else. So what are the options we are having in order to compare? This figure we can compare, right, with a different year, right? 2019-20, the GP margin was 15%. In the previous year, 2018-19, GP margin was 20%. Now it provides us a meaning. Our GP margin has gone down, something wrong. So we need to find a solution for that. මෙයා තනියෙන් ගත්තට එයාගේ කිසිම අයිඩියා එකක් නැහැ. අපිට decisions ගන්න බෑ. But if we able to compare it with something else, companyම fast figures එක අපිට compare කරන්න පුළුවන්. That is why when you are going for auditing, you right at the initial stage you do this. You compare whether the current financial figures, whether it has increased. You perform kind of a trend analysis, right? Then only you can get a meaningful idea, meaningful insight on that ratio. So ratio alone does not provide anything. So it should be comparable. It should be comparable, right? Then right. Then this is one way. අපේ companium past years, past figures එක different year එකත් එක්ක අපිට compare කරන්න පුළුවන්. What is the other option? We can compare this figure with a different company in the same year. Okay, company XYZ is belonging to the same industry. මේ industry එකටම තමයි industry එකේම operate වෙන තව company එකක් තමයි XYZ. And XYZ has recorded the GP margin of 17% in year 2019-20. Again, we can compare. Okay, they have performed better than us. So what they have done better, right? What we can do further to improve this margin, we can compare and make some decisions, right? Or else we can compare it with the industry average. If it is manufacturing industry, right, what is the industry average? What is the manufacturing industry average in terms of GP margin, right? If GP margin, assume it is 15%, then we can compare and say, okay, we are performing well. See, we are maintaining the industry GP margin, industry average in terms of GP margin. We have, right, nothing to worry here. Likewise, you can make decisions only if you able to compare it with something else. So these are three options you are having. You can compare it with a different year in the same company, or you can compare it with a different company in the same industry, or you can compare it with the industry averages. Right. So these things what we have discussed, ratios can be grouped into 5 categories: profitability, solvency, liquidity, efficiency, and shareholders investment, or we can say what? Market ratios. Right. And what else? Individual business must be considered separately, and a ratio that is meaningful for a manufacturing company may not be completely meaningful for a financial institution. Manufacturing company kai financial industry එකට අදාළ company එකකුයි අපිට compare කරන්න බෑ. Right? For an example, if you take a manufacturing company, there are so many overhead expenses, right? And if you take, right, a different company, this proportion will differ, right? So company, industry to industry, there are norms, there are practices, right? So it is very difficult to compare these ratios between the industries. Industries අතර අපිට compare කරන්න අමාරුයි. So that is also one limitation. And what else? Ratio analysis on its own is not sufficient for interpreting company accounts. We should able to compare it with something else. Then only it will provide us useful insights. Right. So these things we have discussed: profitability ratios, ROCE, return on equity, this stuff, solvency ratios, why it is important for us to keep the debt burden under control, right? So these things we have discussed. Liquidity ratios, the difference between solvency and ratio, the rule of thumb, efficiency ratios, what each of these measures means for us, what is the idea behind these ratios, right? All the things which we have discussed are appearing here, right? So there is a small activity. Example number 1. What we need to do? Calculate the operating cycle for the Silva PLC for 2000, let's say 2012, on the basis of the following information: inventory, raw materials, WIP, and finished goods separately provided. Purchaser's value is given as 500,000. Trade accounts receivable value given, trade accounts payable value given, sales value given, cost of sales value given. You need to compute what? Operating cycle. Operating cycle. How to get operating cycle? How to find the operating cycle? Here, see, cash cycle or operating cycle. How can we find that? Inventory turnover period plus receivables collection period minus payables payment period. The operating cycle indicates the level of financing that a company requires as it gives the average number of days that the company is out of pocket. Financing method they need to find a financing method, right, in that out of pocket situation to compensate that out of pocket situation. And here also, right, where a company has cash problems, it should aim to reduce its operating cycle. මේකේ පුළුවන් තරමක් මේ cycle එකේ දවස් ගන්න අඩු කරගන්න තමයි අපි try කරන්න ඕන. අඩු කරගන්න පුළුවන් කොහොමද? එක්ක inventory එක අපේ stock එක inventory එක stores වල තියෙන time period එක අඩු කරන්න ඕන. එහෙම නැත්නම් ණය ගැතියෝගෙන් අපි ඉක්මනට මුදල් collect කරගන්න ඕන. එහෙම නැත්නම් අපි ණය හිමියොන්ට ගෙවන එක පොඩ්ඩක් පරක්කු කරන්න ඕන. So by using those measures, by taking those measures, we can do what? We can improve our cash cycle. Cash cycle එක improve කරනවා කියලා කියන්නේ මෙතන එන figure එක වැඩි කරන එකද අඩු කරන එකද? අඩු කරන එක. Right? අඩු කරන එක. Right. So operating cycle, how can we compute that? Inventory turnover period plus debtors collection period minus creditors payment period. Take 5 minutes and you try this one. Right. So what should be the operating cycle? It should be about the answer. So we need to separately calculate inventory turnover period. How to compute that? Average inventory over cost of sales into 365. Average inventory, right here. So they have not provided us the opening balances. So we need to consider the sum of this as the average inventory value, right? Or the inventory value, 150,000 plus 60,000 plus 200,000 average inventory over cost of sales. Cost of sales they have provided as 750,000 into 365. So we will get inventory turnover period. Then debtors collection period. How can we take that? Average debtors, trade account receivables means the debtors. Debtors, trade account receivables over what? Over credit sales, right? So they have provided us the sales value. So we'll assume that all this 900,000 represents credit sales. So we can consider this. Right? 230,000 over 900,000 into 365. We can get the debtors collection period. Then creditors payment period. How to calculate that? Credit purchase, average creditors over credit purchase into 365. Creditors, here trade accounts payable means the creditors value is 120,000. 120,000 need to be divided by 500,000. We have to assume that this 500,000 represents credit purchase. Right? So 120,000 divided by 500,000 into 365, we will get creditors payment period. So you should get, so these are the formulas that I have discussed. So what should be the ultimate answer, final answer? That should be the operating cycle is 205.2 days. It is very long. The company is not in that much of a healthy position. See here, inventory turnover period, key 199.5 days. Again, api inventory company stores almost 200 days. It is being unsold. Our inventory is unsold and it will remain at our stores. We can netu ape inventory dawas 200ක් 199කුත් තව වරුවක් තියෙනවා stores ඇතුලේ. Then receivable collection period කීයද 93.3 days. අපි ණයට විකුණලා ණය ගැතියෝන්ගෙන් සල්ලි එකතු කරගන්න කොච්චර කාලයක් යනවද 93 days, almost 3 months, right? Almost 3 months. ණය ගැතියෝ අපිට ගෙවන්න මාස 3ක් ගන්නවා 3 months, 93.3 days. What about the payables payment period? Payables payment period, that is 87.6 days. 87.6 days. Right? අපි සාමාන්‍යයෙන් මාස 3ක් යන කලින් ණය හිමියන්ට අදාළ ගෙවීම් සිද්ධ කරනවා. That is the idea. So altogether, if we consider the length of the operating cycle, it is 205.2, mainly due to what? Inventory turnover period. So the steps need to be taken to reduce this inventory turnover period. ඒක unsold වෙලා මෙච්චර කාලයක් තියෙන්නේ. We need to find the reasons for that and we need to take corrective actions, right? And also, if we compare these two, what is the general idea? සාමාන්‍යයෙන් අපි මොකද්ද? You run a business. business එකක් run කරනවා නම් මොකද්ද general idea එක වෙන්න ඕන? අපිට collect කරගන්න තියෙනේම අපි පුළුවන් තරම ඉක්මනට collect කරගන්න. Right? If we are making these policies with related to our suppliers and debtors, right? We need to form policies in such a way where we could collect quickly from our debtors. Debtors lage ණය ගෙතියුන්ගෙන් පුළුවන් තරමක් ඉක්මනට අපි collect කරගන්න බලන්න ඕන. Right? අනිත් පැත්තට එද්දී ණය හිමියොන්ට එද්දී, right? When it comes to payments, we should try to delay it. ඕනකට වඩා too long track කරන එක නෙවෙයි, then right we will miss that, or we will break that chain with the suppliers. Then again, that is also not good for the company. But right, compared to the receivables collection period, we try to right track a little bit when it comes to the payable payment period. ණය ඉක්මනට collect කරගන්න බලන්න ඕන. අනිත් පැත්තෙන් ණය හිමියොන්ට ගෙවන එක පොඩ්ඩක් පරක්කු කරන්න බලන්න ඕන. So then that will help us to better management of our cash. So business එකේ cash අපිට එතකොට හොඳට manage කරන්න පුළුවන් වෙනවා. Right? ණය ගෙතියොන්ගෙන් පුළුවන් තරමක් ඉක්මනට සල්ලි ගන්න, ණය හිමියොන්ට ගෙවන එක පොඩ්ඩක් පරක්කු කරන්න. The general rule. Investor ratios, dividend cover, PE, dividend yield, earnings per share, this stuff we have discussed. DuPont analysis, right? It is something additional for you, so you can right, read it and understand. I have given an example with the answers, so that is something additional. DuPont analysis at your level. Right? So, and in 4th year, 2nd semester, we have financial statement analysis. Then there we have to discuss on this DuPont analysis. Right. Different stakeholders' needs. Right. So financial statements are being analyzed not only by the internal users, there are external users as well. Both internal as well as external users, in order to make effective decisions, they analyze financial statements. They calculate ratios based on the financial statements. එතකොට financial ratios calculate කරන්නේ company management එක විතරක් නෙවෙයි, investors ලා විතරක් නෙවෙයි. Right? There are different stakeholders in a company, internal as well as external. එතකොට එයාලා මේක analyze කරලා බලාපොරොත්තු වෙන දේවල් වෙනස්. Different stakeholders have different needs. එක එක්කෙනාගේ අවශ්‍යතා වෙනස් වෙන්න පුළුවන්. Right? See here, existing investors, දැනටමත් business එකේ invest කරලා තියෙන අය, දැනටමත් shareholders ලා, why they need to analyze these ratios, these financial ratios? What is the purpose of that? What? To understand that their investment is sound, right? To get an understanding whether their investment is sound, whether the company they have invested performing well. Yeah, අපි invest කරලා තියෙන company එක හොඳට run වෙනවද, හොඳට operate වෙනවද, profit අපි හිතුව තරම් generate කරනවද? That idea can be gained by referring to these financial ratios. So that is why existing investors keep on analyzing these financial statements using financial ratios, right? We invest කරපු company එක profit හොයනවද, ඒකේ growth potentials කොහොමද, will it grow or will it right erode, the profits will be eroded. Likewise, they can have an understanding, right? And also whether they are in a position to pay off enough dividends. අපි invest කරලා තියෙන dividends බලාපොරොත්තුෙන් අපිට dividend ගෙවන්න හැකියාවක් එයාලට තියෙනවද? So these things can be analyzed and understood by the existing investors by analyzing the financial statements. Then potential investors, existing investors and potential investors. Existing investors means the investors already invested, the investors who have already invested, they are shareholders. දැනටමත් invest කරලා තියෙන අය, දැනටමත් shareholders ලා තමයි existing investors ලා කියලා කියන්නේ. Potential investors means those who expect to invest in that business. තාම ඉන්වෙස්ට් කරලා නැහැ. හැබැයි මොකක් කරන්න බලාපොරොත්තු වෙනවද? ඉන්වෙස්ට් කරන්න බලාපොරොත්තු වෙන ඉන්න අය. potential investors. එතකොට එයාලා මොකද්ද බලන්නේ? shares එහෙම ගන්න ඉන්නව නම් කම්පැනි එක මොකද්ද බලන්නේ? right. company performance කොහොමද? එයාලා dividends ගෙවන්නේ මොන විදියටද? එයාලා earn කරනවද? earnings per share කොහොමද? right. එයාලගේ future growth prospect එක කොහොමද? Likewise, we can get an understanding on these aspects with potential investors. Then banks and other lenders, those who provide loans and other facilities to the company to run the business, why they need to look into your financial statements, why they need to analyze your financial statements. Hey, අපි මේ කම්පැනියට ණය දුන්නොතින් අපිට ඒ ණය ආපහු අය කරගන්න පුළුවන්ද? එයාලට අපි දෙන ණයට අදාළ පොලිය ගෙවන්න හැකියාවක් තියෙනවද? To assess these things, right? These banks and other lenders to analyze the financial statements, right? To understand whether funds will be available to repay borrowings, their repaying ability, to assess the repaying ability, right? And also to assess whether they're able to pay the interest in due time with the terms and conditions they have imposed. එයාලා දාපු කොන්දේසියට අදාළව ගෙවීම් කරගෙන යන්න පුළුවන් හැකියාවක් තියෙනවද? To assess that, right? Banks and other lending companies to analyze financial statements, right? And management, company management, why they need to analyze these financial statements, why they need to calculate these financial ratios and all, to assess whether they have performed well, right? Whether their strategies are working. So they make various decisions, strategical decisions are taken by the management to assess whether their strategies are working or whether there are any amendments, whether there are any changes needed in terms of the strategies can be assessed by analyzing these financial statements, by calculating these financial ratios, right? And how is their operations in terms of debts, right? In terms of suppliers, how they need to deal with. In terms of debtors, how they need to deal with. What are the terms and conditions that need to be amended with respect to debtors, with respect to suppliers, right? About holding the inventory, right? So these things can be understood well by analyzing these financial ratios, right? Financial ratios. Then another kind of stakeholder is employees. Why employees need to look for your financial statements? Why? Employees, right? To confirm long-term job stability and prospects for career development or pay rises. In the shorter term, profits may be relevant to the bonus payment. Employees, that is why they need to look for your financial statements. Bonus ගෙවන්න කම්පැනියට පුළුවන්ද? මේ අවුරුද්දේ අපිට bonus එක ගෙවන්න කම්පැනියට හැකියාවක් තියෙනවද? Right? අපේ job security එක මොන වගේද? කම්පැනි එක හොඳට කරනව නම් තමයි අපේ job security එක තියෙන්නේ. Right? What about the job security? Right? So will there be any career development or will there be any pay rises? අපේ පරිවැටි කරන්න හැකියාවක් තියෙනවද? You can get an understanding on these aspects by analyzing the financial statements for employees. In terms of customers, what? In terms of customers, to understand whether a company is in a position to continue a trading relationship into the future, right? Customer කෙනෙක් නම් බලන්න මොකද්ද? මෙයාලත් එක්ක අපිට දීර්ඝ කාලීනව trading relationship එකක් තියාගෙන යන්න පුළුවන්. නැත්නම් අපි යාගේ company product එකකට හුරු වුණොත් එයා හරියට operate වෙන්නේ නැත්නම් ඒ company එක කඩන් වැටුණොත්, right? So we need again shift to another product that may be a disadvantage that will negatively impact to the customers. Therefore, customers will also look into these financial statements in order to assess whether they are able to make a sound trading relationship with that company, right? Suppliers. Suppliers also want to confirm that the company is in a position to continue a trading relationship. මෙයාට අපි supply කරොතින් මෙන්න මේ raw materials මෙයාට දුන්නොතින් right මෙයාලා ඒව හරියට පාවිච්චි කරලා එයාලගේ operations smoothly run කරයිද right are they performing well enough are they generating enough profits or are they holding inventories for too long whether they have the ability to pay off debts right pay off their debts and how quickly they can pay off their debts like that way suppliers also can assess about the underlying company by analyzing their financial statements. Government, why government? What is the purpose of that? Right? To assess whether they can earn, whether they can impose tax, right? Whether they can impose tax for this particular company and earn some government revenue, government income. ඔය කම්පැනි එක ප්‍රොෆිට් තියනවද තියනවා නම් අපිට මෙයාට ටැක්ස් එකක් ඉම්පෝස් කරන්න පුළුවන්ද අපි ටැක්ස් එකක් ඉම්පෝස් කරොතින් මේ කම්පැනි එක කඩන් වැටෙයිද එතකොට අපිට දැනට එන ඉන්කම් එකක් නැති වෙයිද these things need to be analyzed by the government by referring to the financial statements tax ගහලා පුළුවන් තරමක් ටැක්ස් ගහලා ඉන්කම් ගන්න එක නෙවෙයි government එකේ objective එක මොකද්ද කම්පැනියක් ස්ටැබ්ලිෂ් කරගෙන කම්පැනියක් grow කරන ගමන් එයාලටත් ඉන්කම් එකක් ගන්න එක ඕනමට වඩා ටැක්ස් ගෙවුවොත් මොකද්ද වෙන්නේ ඕනමට වඩා ටැක්ස් ගෙවුවොත් එක අවුරුද්දක ටැක්ස් ඉන්කම් එක වැඩි වෙලා ඒ ගවර්න්මන්ට් එකට එතනින් එහාට ඒක කන්ටිනියු වෙන්නේ නැහැ right ඕනමට වඩා ටැක්ස් ගෙවුවොත් කම්පැනි එක කඩන් වැටෙනවා right එතකොට ටැක්ස් එකක් ගන්න ඉස්සරහට කම්පැනි එකක් නැතුව යනවා so government need to be careful when imposing tax so for that so they can refer these financial statements and they can analyze these financial statements when making decisions about imposing tax. And general public, you and me, why you and me need to analyze financial statements? The general public may be concerned with how a company is run in terms of supporting the community and creating jobs. Mainly we are looking for this creating jobs. Right? අපි loss පිට දුවන company එක වැඩට යන්න කැමතිද? If you are unemployed at the moment and if there is a company runs with net losses, do we like to apply for that company? No. Right? So before applying for jobs, you need to look into those informations as well, whether they are earning profits, whether they are doing well, how is their operations, right? If you are into that company, your job will be secured, right? The job security will be there. Likewise, right? You can analyze or you can have an understanding by analyzing the financial statements. So this is how different stakeholders refer these financial statements and analyze them while keeping different objectives. එකම දෙයකට තමයි refer කරන්නේ financial statements හැබැයි analyze කරන intention එක වෙනස්. investors ලගේ වෙනම intention එකක්, government එකේ වෙනම intention එකක්, general public එකේ වෙනම intention එකක්, banks and other lenders a different intention, right? Suppliers a different intentions, employees a different intention. So the intention can be different. Right. So the last part of this is on the limitations. Limitations of financial analysis. What are the limitations? First one is what? I will quickly go through this. First one, financial analysis often cannot provide answers to questions. Yes, that provide you the direction or that provide you some red flags. Look here, there can be an issue here. Right? Look, you are holding inventories for too long, therefore there can be an issue here. Likewise, it provides you the red flags, but not provide you the solutions. ප්‍රශ්න තියෙන තැන් highlight කරනවා. හැබැයි මොකක් කරන්නේ නැද්ද? ප්‍රශ්න වලට විසඳුමක් දෙන්නේ නැහැ. අපේ liquidity එක අඩුයි. හරි, liquidity ratio එක කල් කරාට පස්සේ පේනවා මොකද්ද? liquidity එක අඩුයි. හැබැයි liquidity එක අඩු එකට ඒක උත්තරයක් දෙනවද? නැහැ. හැබැයි අඩු තැන පෙන්නනවා. ප්‍රශ්න තියෙන තැන් පෙන්නනවා. ප්‍රශ්න වලට විසඳුමක් දෙන්නේ නැහැ. That is one limitation. Second one, accounting policies and practices. accounting policies and practices. Different companies follow different accounting policies. They have different accounting practices. Then the comparison will be meaningless. Right? Straight line method එක පාවිච්චි කරලා depreciation කරන company එකකුයි reducing balance method එක පාවිච්චි කරලා depreciation කරන company එකකුයි අතර financial statements compare කරලා අපිට හරිම idea එකක් ගන්න බැහැ. Because they have adopted different accounting policies. Right? That limitation is there. Then the calculation of ratios itself. The calculation of ratios itself. In practice, there are varying ways in which ratios are calculated. I will take one, just one example. Fixed asset ratio. Some people calculate it by deducting only the inventories from current assets. And in some cases, in some books, in some notes, and in some practical calculations also, we come across where both inventories as well as prepayments are being reduced. So there are different ways to calculate the same ratio, and it depends as far as you can justify that, justify the reasons to apply such kind of a practice, right? That is one limitation. And the fourth point, historical financial statements. Historical financial statements. So these are dead information. අපි මේ ඇනලයිස් කරන්නේ මොකක් දිහාද? පරණ පහුවෙච්ච ෆයිනෑන්ෂල් ස්ටේට්මන්ට්ස් දිහා බලලා 31st March අපේ ෆයිනෑන්ෂල් ඉයර් එන්ඩ් එක ඉවර වුණාට අපිට ඔය රේෂියෝස් බලා ගන්න පුළුවන් කවද්ද? ඔය ඇනුවල් රිපෝට් එක පබ්ලිෂ් කරාට පස්සේ. Right? Annual report එක පබ්ලිෂ් කරන්න. If the financial year ends on 31st March, the annual report may be published somewhere around, right? September, October, somewhere around that. July, right? So those are, so we are referring to dead information, not on the future oriented information. That is why the concepts like integrated reporting has come into place to avoid these limitations. But especially when it comes to ratio analysis, we are referring to some dead information, historical information that doesn't provide us about that does not include the future oriented information. Future-oriented information based කරගෙන නෙවෙයි අපි analysis වෙන්නේ past dead historical information based කරගෙන. That is the limitation. And the fifth point is on window dressing. Window dressing means simply the manipulation, right? Manipulation of financial statements. Manipulating the year-end statement of financial position in order to report favorable amounts. There can be manipulations. එතකොට අපි manipulate කරපු financial statements base කරගෙන නම් අපේ analysis එක කරන්නේ again that will be meaningless, right? And the last point is on seasonality. Seasonality. But it says some businesses are affected by seasonality. That is true, right? This is less likely to affect SOPL and SOCF, but affect to the statement of financial position. සමහර companies තියෙනවා දැන් tourism companies එහෙම ගත්තොත් tourist එන මාස තියෙනවා, right? There are certain months that high number of tourists arrive. So then in such months their sales may be increased, right? They may have incurred a higher amount of cost, but that is okay as far as statement of profit and loss and cash flow statement is considered. But statement of financial position provides us the information as at a particular date. But then what? It does not, it may not reflect the ideal situation. Harima situation එක reflect වෙන්නේ නැති වෙන්න පුළුවන් balance sheet එකේ, right? Because of the seasonality effect. Those things also we need to consider when analyzing financial statements. So it also plays as a limitation in terms of analyzing the financial statements. Okay, so these are the major limitations in financial analysis. When we analyzing these ratios and all, these limitations are there. So we need to be careful, and we need to keep that in mind. Right? And further information, so when analyzing these financial statements, don't just look on these financial figures. Apart from that, there are various other reports and records that we can refer and we need to refer, especially when you are into practice. Right? In practical terms, if you are doing these analysis, we always need to refer to other relevant documents, other relevant reports and all.